somewhere in our 40s or 50s, a quiet moment often arrives. It may come in the middle of the night, or as you stand in front of the mirror in the morning. It is not loud, not dramatic, but it whispers, "Is this truly the life I wanted? Have I lived fully, or have I missed something essential?" For many, this is what the West calls a midlife crisis. For those walking the path of the Dharma, it is not merely a crisis but also an invitation, a chance to rediscover meaning, to face impermanence with wisdom, and to awaken in the very heart of change. At this age, unease is common. Careers that once promised so much can feel stale. Relationships shift in ways we did not expect. The body begins to show its age. Dreams we once carried so brightly now appear like distant shadows. And with all of this comes anxiety, regret, and sometimes the quiet fear of aging. These are the very struggles people often describe when they speak of the Buddhism midlife crisis, not as a theory, but as the lived experience of wondering how to move forward with peace. The beauty of Buddhist wisdom is that it does not deny this pain. Instead, it speaks directly to it. The Buddha never promised to stop time or keep youth from fading. He offered something deeper, a way to understand suffering, to release the grip of clinging, and to find clarity in the flow of impermanence. Here on Infinite Buddhist Teachings, I invite you to sit with me not as students before a lecture, but as friends beneath a tree. Today we will walk together through this terrain of midlife. We will see how the Four Noble Truths, the teaching of impermanence, the understanding of no self, and the practices of mindfulness, meditation, and loving kindness can transform this stage of life. And as we explore, we will find that these truths are not distant or abstract. They are alive in the river that never ceases to flow, in the tree that releases its leaves in autumn, in the candle flame that steadies despite the wind, in the lotus that blooms clean and radiant from the mud. So if you find yourself in your 40s or 50s, restless, uncertain, or even afraid, stay with me. Let us breathe together. Let us see how Buddhism does not erase the midlife crisis but transforms it, turning fear into freedom, anxiety into clarity, and midlife itself into awakening. Part 1. Seeing midlife through two lenses. In Western culture, the idea of a midlife crisis has been around for decades. Describes that uneasy stretch of time when the roles we've worn for so long no longer fit the way they used to. A man who once poured his whole being into work may wake one morning and feel a strange restlessness. A woman who raised her children with love may walk through a quiet house and hear only silence echoing back. For some, this turning point shows up as sudden, reckless choices, a new car, a new affair, an escape into something that promises to bring youth back. For others, it arrives more quietly, like a gray mist settling in, a slow sadness that whispers that meaning is slipping away. But there is another way to look at this season. What if midlife is not the collapse of meaning, but the invitation to discover a deeper one? What if this restlessness is not a failure, but a mirror, showing us truths we have been too busy to see? Think for a moment of the seasons. Spring bursts with color, summer glows with fullness, and then autumn comes. The leaves turn, they let go, drifting gently to the ground. If you looked only at the falling leaves, you might say the tree is dying. But those who understand know that autumn is not the end. It is part of the cycle, part of renewal. The tree is not broken. It is simply preparing for what comes next. Midlife is our autumn. Feels like loss only when we cling to summer. When we soften into it, we begin to see its beauty. A quieter beauty, a beauty of wisdom, of harvest, of lessons that can only come with time. And in that shift, the fear begins to loosen. Midlife no longer has to be a crisis. It can be a turning point, one that opens the heart to a richer, more grounded way of living. Part 2. The Light of Wisdom. When people speak about a midlife crisis, they often picture a cliff, one life ending, another dangling somewhere out of reach. But the cliff is only a feeling. What is really happening is quieter and more intimate. A meeting between the story we have told about ourselves and the undeniable rhythm of change. The strain you feel in your 40s or 50s is the pull of two tides. The old narrative, asking you to keep everything as it was, and life itself asking you to soften your grip. In that tension, midlife anxiety grows. The way through is not to leap blindly or to freeze in place, but to see clearly what is actually here, and to relate to it with a wiser heart. Clarity begins with the simplest truth: everything moves. Words like impermanence can sound abstract, but the experience is not. It is the way dawn dissolves into day without asking permission, the way a shoreline redraws itself after each tide, the way a candle burns by giving itself away. At midlife, this movement can feel like theft: youth leaving, roles changing, plans being revised. But look closer and you'll notice that the same flow that takes also gives. The receding tide reveals shells you could not see before. The tree after autumn stands in a clean outline, its form honest and strong. When you lean into this rhythm instead of bracing against it, you do not become passive. You become aligned. That alignment is the beginning of peace in any Buddhism midlife crisis journey. Much of the pain at this season comes from the way we hold the idea of me. For years, the self can seem like a solid object: job title, relationship role, a set of achievements arranged like stones in a wall. Then midlife arrives and a few stones shift. The wall trembles and fear rushes in. If these stones move, who am I? Wisdom answers gently, you were never the wall. You were always the living pattern that these stones temporarily formed. You are more like a river than a statue, recognizable in your curve and current, yet never frozen in place. This is not a philosophical trick. It is practical medicine. When you relate to yourself as a process rather than a possession, you can change without feeling that you are being erased. You can let a role end and remain whole. You can try a new path without betraying what is essential in you. Another quiet shift happens when you notice the difference between pain and the extra pain you add to it. An arrow striking the arm hurts. The second arrow is the story that insists this should not have happened. Not to me. Not now. The first arrow is unavoidable in a human life. The second is optional, born from resistance and replay. At midlife, the second arrow is common. I should be further along. I wasted my best years. I'm running out of time. Watch how those thoughts tighten the chest and narrow the day. Then watch what happens when you meet them with steadiness and breath. You are not pretending everything is fine. You are refusing to stab yourself again. This is real mindfulness meditation in daily life, not a trick to escape reality, but a way to stop multiplying your wounds. Meaning, too, changes its shape around this age. Earlier years often measure by acquisition. Titles, milestones, visible markers of progress. As seasons turn, meaning becomes less about what you can accumulate and more about how you relate. A cup of tea, fully tasted, can mean more than a promotion celebrated on the run. A conversation in which you listen with your whole being can matter more than the number of contacts in your phone. This is not settling for less. It is discovering depth. Finding meaning at midlife is not a consolation prize. It is a maturation of attention. A love that grows roots instead of racing for height. Regret often walks beside you now, sometimes loud, sometimes disguised as a quiet ache. It points to roads not taken and asks, what if? You cannot argue regret into silence, but you can harvest its wisdom. If a missed path still calls, perhaps part of it can be woven into the life you have. An element, a practice, a study, a service. If the door has truly closed, you can honor what it taught you about what matters. Then bow and face what is here. The past is a landscape that cannot be walked again, but it can illuminate the road under your feet. This is where loving kindness toward yourself matters most. Not indulgence, not excuses. Simple warmth toward a human who has done their best with the light they had, and who is willing to keep learning. Sometimes the mind pushes back, but time is short. Yes, and that is why depth is precious. The awareness that life is finite is not a curse upon midlife. It is the lens that brings the present into focus. When you remember that every day is unrepeatable, you stop bargaining with your own heart. You stop postponing the conversation that would heal a distance. You stop filling hours with noise you do not value. You begin to protect what is tender and give away what you cannot keep. This is the quiet courage that grows when you face limits without bitterness. If you listen carefully, you'll notice that calm does not come by accident. It is cultivated the way a garden is tended, a little each day with patience. Attention is the soil. Breath is the water. Steady choices are the sunlight. You can sit for a few minutes each morning, letting thoughts come and go like clouds moving across a wide sky. You can walk slowly in the evening, feeling the ground meet your feet, letting the day settle behind you. You can pause before speaking when irritation flares, the way a lake settles after a thrown stone. None of this requires special beliefs. It is a way of relating to experience that softens midlife anxiety and makes room for insight to appear. Stories from the old teachings echo these same patterns without requiring anyone to adopt a label. The lesson is always the same. The struggle grows when we clutch, and it loosens when we release. Confusion thickens when we stare only at ourselves, and it clears when compassion widens the field. You can feel the truth of that without memorizing a single term. Picture the moon reflected in a still pond. When the water is agitated, the moon seems broken. When the surface calms, the reflection becomes whole. Not because the moon changed, but because the water did. The world will still have weather. Your mind does not have to become the storm. If there is a single thread running through all of this, it is friendship with your own life. Not the life you were promised by advertisements, not the life you imagined at 25, but the life that is actually here, the one that breathes with you at dawn, that sits beside you in traffic, that ages with honesty and still surprises you with light. To befriend this life is to take the hand of wisdom without ceremony. It is to choose presence over performance, depth over display, and the long, kind gaze over the quick judgment. In that friendship, Buddhism helps overcome midlife crisis not by erasing change, but by teaching you how to stand in the current without drowning. As you carry this into the next part of our journey, notice how the heart responds when it is met rather than managed. Notice how the mind softens when it is seen rather than scolded. Notice how the body eases when breath is given space. These are not small things. They are the beginnings of a different way to live. One that does not fear autumn because it trusts the whole cycle. One that does not cling to a fixed self because it recognizes the beauty of becoming. One that does not chase meaning because it learns to grow meaning where it stands. On infinite Buddhist teachings, this is the light we practice to keep. A steady flame cupped in both hands, bright enough to walk by, gentle enough to warm the room you are in now. Part 3. Practicing in the midst of midlife. When the storm of midlife begins to stir, most people ask, "What should I do to make this go away?" But the truth is, the storm itself is not the enemy. The way we meet it is what matters. You don't need to fight against the wind. You need to learn how to set your sail. This is where practice enters, not as a religious ritual reserved for temples, but as the daily gestures that keep your heart steady while the seasons shift. One of the simplest and most powerful practices is learning to pause. In the rush of midlife, with its pressures of career, family, aging parents, growing children, and the quiet hum of anxiety, we forget to stop. A pause can be as small as 3 breaths before answering a difficult question, or sitting quietly for 5 minutes in the morning with your coffee before the day demands you. These pauses may seem small, but like tiny drops of water wearing down stone, they shape the landscape of your mind. With time, they create room between what happens and how you respond, a space where peace can grow. Meditation does not have to be complicated. You don't need incense or special cushions unless those things nourish you. Simply sit, notice your breath as it moves in and out, and watch your thoughts the way you might watch clouds pass across a sky. Some clouds are light and drift quickly. Others are heavy, dark with regret or worry, and they linger. But no cloud ever owns the sky. The more you practice watching without clinging, the less power those thoughts have. This is how mindfulness meditation eases midlife stress, not by erasing your problems, but by teaching you not to be swept away by every thought that passes through. Another practice that touches deeply at this stage of life is cultivating kindness toward yourself. Many people in their 40s and 50s carry regrets like stones in their pockets, choices they wish had been different, opportunities they feel they missed. It's easy to look back and judge yourself harshly, but judgment does not heal. Compassion does. A simple way to begin is through loving kindness meditation. Close your eyes, breathe gently, and repeat phrases of goodwill. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. At first it might feel awkward, even forced. especially if you've been your own harshest critic for years. But keep going. Imagine speaking to yourself as you would to a dear friend. Slowly, warmth begins to soften the hard edges of regret. And as your heart expands toward yourself, it naturally extends toward others, reminding you that no one walks this road alone. Even daily routines can become doorways into practice. Drinking a cup of tea can be a meditation when you truly taste the warmth and notice the steam rising. Washing dishes can be an act of mindfulness when you feel the water on your hands and the smooth surface of the plate. Walking from your car to your office can be a mindful walk when you notice your steps and the air around you. In this way, ordinary life becomes the training ground for peace. You don't need to carve out hours you don't have. You weave awareness into the hours you already live. At midlife, one of the greatest fears is death, the sense that time is running out. In many Western conversations, death is avoided, pushed aside, treated as a dark intruder. But Buddhist practice invites us to look directly at it, gently and without morbid fascination. This is sometimes called death awareness meditation, to sit quietly and reflect, one day I will not be here. This body will age, weaken, and dissolve. At first, the thought can feel heavy, but stay with it. The more you accept the reality of death, the more vibrant life becomes. Every breath feels precious. Every sunrise feels like a gift. Death awareness is not about despair. It is about gratitude, about realizing that what is limited is also infinitely valuable. There is a story told of a monk who would sweep the temple courtyard each morning. Someone asked him why he swept so carefully, knowing that the wind would scatter leaves again by evening. The monk smiled and said, "Yes, the wind will come. But while I sweep, I am fully alive." This is the heart of practice at midlife. You cannot control the winds of aging, loss, or change, but you can choose how you sweep the moments of your life. Each moment of presence, each act of compassion, each pause for breath becomes a way to live fully, even in the face of uncertainty. And so practice is not about perfection. It is not about becoming someone else. It is about befriending your own life as it is right now, with all its cracks and beauty, its disappointments and hopes. The more you practice, the more you see that midlife does not have to be a battlefield. It can be a classroom, a garden, even a sanctuary. This is where Buddhism helps overcome the midlife crisis, not by promising escape, but by showing that the very ground you stand on can become a place of peace, if only you learn how to stand upon it. Part 4. From crisis to transformation. When people hear the phrase midlife crisis, they often picture a collapse, as if the life they knew is crumbling and nothing steady remains. But what if the collapse itself is the doorway? What if the very ground shaking beneath your feet is not trying to throw you off, but trying to wake you up? Transformation rarely arrives in the form of comfort. More often it comes dressed as difficulty, asking us to listen more deeply, to live more honestly. Think of the lotus flower. It does not bloom in a glass vase of clean water. It rises through mud, through darkness, through places most of us would avoid. Yet when it opens, it does so with breathtaking beauty. Midlife is our mud. It can feel heavy, sticky, difficult to move through, but it is also fertile. Out of the questions, the regrets, the fears, something pure can grow. A new way of being that is less concerned with appearances and more concerned with truth. This is how Buddhism helps overcome midlife crisis, not by erasing the mud, but by teaching us how to bloom through it. Transformation begins the moment you stop running from yourself. So much of the pain of midlife comes not from change itself, but from resistance to it. We cling to the past, to youth, to identities that no longer fit, as if holding tightly will stop time. But what happens when you loosen your grip? It is like standing in a river. The harder you resist the current, the more exhausted you become. When you let go, you discover the river can carry you. To soften into the flow is not to give up. It is to trust that life has a rhythm larger than your control. This does not mean passivity. Transformation is active, but it is a different kind of action. It is no longer about proving, performing, or chasing. It is about aligning. Instead of asking, "How do I get back what I lost?" you begin to ask, "What is life offering me now?" That simple shift changes everything. Regret turns into guidance. Fear turns into clarity. Even grief becomes a teacher. showing you the depth of your love and the capacity of your heart. Consider the tree once more. In spring, it stretches upward, growing taller, fuller, greener. In autumn, it releases. To the untrained eye, autumn looks like death. But to those who understand, autumn is preparation. The tree is not giving up. It is conserving, gathering, readying itself for renewal. Midlife is our autumn. When you learn to honor it, you begin to sense its quiet gifts. The wisdom to see more clearly, the patience to love more deeply, the courage to let go of what no longer serves you. Transformation also means shifting how we measure value. In the first half of life, value often comes from achievement, the promotions, the accomplishments, the visible progress. But in the second half, value often comes from depth, the quiet presence you bring to your loved ones, the steadiness you offer in times of turmoil, the compassion that grows in your words and actions. This is the richness that cannot be measured by titles or bank accounts, but that fills the heart with meaning. One of the most powerful aspects of transformation is the birth of compassion. When you have suffered, truly suffered, you begin to see others differently. You recognize their struggles in your own, the midlife questions you wrestle with. Am I enough? Have I wasted time? How do I face aging? Are not yours alone. They belong to millions of others walking the same path. When you realize this, your heart opens. You find yourself less quick to judge, more ready to forgive, more willing to reach out a hand. In this way, the pain of midlife becomes the seed of connection. Sometimes people fear that transformation will take away their identity, that they will no longer recognize themselves. But the opposite is true. Transformation does not erase who you are. It reveals who you have always been beneath the noise. It strips away the masks you no longer need, the performances that no longer serve, and leaves you closer to your true nature. You become not smaller, but freer. And freedom is the essence of this turning point. Freedom from chasing what does not matter. Freedom from clinging to what cannot last. Freedom from the harsh voice of regret that insists you are too late. The truth is, you are not too late. You are right on time. Midlife is not the closing of a door. It is the opening of a deeper one. You are invited now to live not by old scripts, but by presence, by clarity, by compassion. So when the midlife storm rises, remember this. Storms do not last forever. They clear the air. They water the earth. They prepare the ground for new growth. Your midlife crisis is not a punishment. It is a passage. If you let it, it will not break you. It will remake you, not into someone else, but into someone more whole, more awake, more alive. Part 5. Conclusion. From Crisis to Awakening. If you have listened this far, you already know something important. The midlife crisis does not define you. It is only a name, a phrase invented to describe a storm many of us pass through. But you are more than the storm. You are the sky that holds it, and the sky does not break when clouds gather. It only waits steady until the light shines again. The years of your 40s and 50s are not a mistake in the story of your life. They are a chapter rich with turning points. Yes, there may be anxiety, regret, even fear of aging. But within the very heart of that struggle lies the seed of transformation. This is where Buddhism helps overcome midlife crisis in a way both gentle and profound. By teaching you to befriend impermanence instead of fighting it, to see yourself as a living, flowing process rather than a fixed identity, and to walk through each day with mindfulness and compassion as your companions. Remember the lotus rising from the mud, the tree letting go of its leaves in autumn, the river carrying you when you stop resisting, the candle flame steadying when cupped by the hand. These are not just images. They are mirrors for your own journey. They remind you that beauty does not disappear with age. It only changes its form. They remind you that letting go is not loss, but preparation for renewal. They remind you that calm is not given by the world. It is cultivated within you, breath by breath. So if you are standing at this threshold, do not see yourself as broken. You are not too late. You are exactly on time. Midlife is not the end of meaning. It is the beginning of awakening. The questions that rise now are not signs of failure. They are invitations to live more honestly, more deeply, more fully. Here on Infinite Buddhist Teachings, we walk this path together. If this message has touched you, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe, share your reflections, and join this circle of companions who are learning to see midlife not as a crisis, but as a sacred turning point. Tell me in the comments what part of this journey speaks to your heart, and know that your words may be the light someone else needs. Life will keep moving. Seasons will keep changing, but you are not alone in this. Together we can walk with clarity, with compassion, with courage, transforming the whispers of midlife into the song of awakening.